Welcome to Getting Rich Together. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. This show was born from my own journey. Coming out of a divorce, I reached out to 50 women to talk to them about money. 95% of them did not want to go there. That's when I realized we need spaces where wealth isn't hidden in silence, but shared in possibilities. Here, you'll meet women from all backgrounds, trailblazers, risk takers, visionaries, each expanding what wealth can look like. This is your place to be inspired, to discover new pathways, and to remember that we rise by building wealth together. Getting Rich Together is a Wealth Catalyst production. At Wealth Catalyst, we bring together education, networks, and great opportunities for women to build wealth and change the world. Now, on to today's show.
Today, I am joined with someone who I believe has the power to change the world. Flossie Hall, you are someone from the moment that I met exudes this power and this kindness and this love. You have done things, I think, on this planet and have inspired people in ways that you may not even know what that legacy will look like. And that is very exciting. And you're not stopping. It almost feels like despite your incredible career and successes, you're also just getting started. So for those of you who don't know Flossie Hall, she is a powerhouse entrepreneur. She's built and exited multiple seven-figure businesses across a variety of verticals. She has changed the lives and has trained thousands of founders around the world through incredible partnerships with global brands that we all know, like Amazon, NASDAQ, USAA. And she is now at the helm of Stella Foundation, an incredible organization that serves tens of thousands of female founders around the world globally. Flossie, you've also helped to move over $200 million of capital into those who are satisfying their dreams, changing the world, and redefining what it looks like to be a female entrepreneur. Thank you for being here today on Getting Rich Together. It's been a long time overdue.
It has. We've been trying to do this for a year. Life. It's not like we're busy or anything.
Yeah, no joke. I'm so excited to dive into all the things that are happening today. But before we get to today, I want to start off with a little girl, Flossie, someone who was maybe at one point 10, 12 years old. Maybe it was pigtails, ponytails. Maybe you were a tomboy. Maybe you were a girly girl. Double click onto a young Flossie. Where did you grow up? What was life like around you? And what were some of the money stories and things that you were picking up at this very young age?
So young Flossie had no front teeth. I actually lost my 4 front teeth from the time I was 4 until I was almost, 9 years old. So I was toothless Flossie for a little while. I grew up incredibly poor, so money is a very emotional and substantial part of my life, like many others. I was raised by a mom who didn't come from much, dropped out of school, I think in 5th or 6th grade, had me as a teenager. I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother and sister. We all have different dads. We grew up pretty day to day as kids, but you don't know that, until you get a little bit older in high school and things like that. So it was pretty hard watching my mom struggle from, job to job. We moved every single year as a kid. We never owned a home. We went from apartment to apartment to apartment. It was really unstable. We didn't have the things that other kids had. We didn't have name brand groceries, which I thought made you super rich. We didn't have a vehicle. My mom used to walk to work. We were so poor. And we didn't have people around us who had money either. The kids that I saw at school that had houses and cars and, the name brand clothes and Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren, I was like, oh, those are the rich kids. But I was still a very headstrong, smart, pretty, popular kid, even for being the poor kid on the block. My kids and my mom especially like to say that I used to run this town. So I had to use my grit and my brains to get the things I wanted out of life. Yeah, it was tough as a kid.
When you were in high school, I feel like up until high school, there's a lot of things we don't know. And then all of a sudden in high school, it's like, I remember when I was in high school, the popular kids with money all wear Abercrombie, it was like such a thing. And I was like, man, like, I guess I'm just not that girl. I can't afford it. And so I started to find and craft my identity almost at a young age, because you're forced to say, like, who am I without these things that other people might have? And so in high school, did you find yourself gravitating to academics? Was it independence? Let me get a job. How did you start to define who you were? And what did you think of yourself at the time? Like, what did you know yourself to be?
Looking back, I have a lot of opinions, but I think like in high school, just like you said, there were the haves and the have-nots. We were definitely the have-nots. And because I used my power, per se, being the popular girl in school, I was also incredibly kind to everybody. Even though I was popular, I lifted up those that were picked on and stood up to those that thought they were bigger than me and they weren't. But as a teenager, when you get into those high school years, I realized that it didn't matter. My family's identity didn't define me. The things that they saw, in my house, it wasn't my house per se. It was my mom's house, right? Even though I grew up there, I never thought it was a home, but I knew that those things didn't define me. I know that wasn't who I was. And it was really hard. And I actually became a mom as a teenager in high school. So I didn't really have the choice of what I wanted to do in life. I was forced to step out at 17 and get a job and get an apartment and go financially be viable. But the very first thing I did, I said, I don't want my child to grow up the way that I grew up. I'm going to go work and I'm going to fight. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he has a better life. And, I still to this day, he's 26. I say, we grew up together and, I did the best that I could. But, fast forward these 26 years and I feel like I did all those things I said I would do. It was hard, but, I made it to college. I worked 3 jobs. I did all the things that, he always had a safe roof and a clean home and nice things and food. And he didn't struggle the way that I struggled. So I think as a teenager, I didn't have that option to be like, this is what I think I'm going to do. I was always forced into those situations, but I'm a tough cookie. And I think it was never not an option for me to just go work my ass off and get everything I thought I could earn. And I knew, I was like, if I can see you doing it, I could do that too. And I used to just identify people in other rooms and I would go stand next to them and I'd say, teach me everything you know. I'll learn. I'll work harder than anybody else that I know. And every job I got, I worked up really fast. I was like, okay, I got brains. I got hard work. I got grit. I can figure this thing out. So even if you start at the very, very bottom, entry level, minimum wage, bottom of the barrel, you can work your way up if you have brains, heart, and hustle and want to. So starting early, my relationship with money from my family onto making my own family was always the center of everything I did.
Wow, Flossie. I feel like there's this part of the brain when all of a sudden you feel the sense of deep responsibility that if it's going to be, it's up to me. And it's something that John actually says a lot from when he was younger, like this feeling that, you are so self-sufficient or you have no choice but to rely on yourself, that it's almost like some parts of the brain sort of shut off and you're like, all right, it's go mode. And, you're building and you're learning so much about yourself and what you can do. And it's almost like the bigger you dream or the further you see out, the faster you get there and the more you can achieve. And then all of a sudden feels like it becomes a game of not can I, but what do I want to do, right? Or what is the thing that I'd like to choose to apply myself to? As you found yourself with a luxury of being able to support yourself and get yourself to university, which is not an easy feat for anyone who's just navigating that, let's say, just without financial support from their family, but also with the great responsibility and pleasure of being a mother and navigating through this journey. How did you decide what you wanted to study? I mean, obviously, it feels like there are the practical, okay, I need to do these things to get these kinds of jobs. Was it that sort of thinking? Or was it more like, I'm interested in exploring this? How did you take advantage or leverage and use the education that you were providing for yourself?
So my background's kind of odd because I was supposed to be a doctor. And as a, young teenage mom, I rolled into the university and I, was looking at courses, and I love science and human biology. And I've always been an uber nerd. And I said, I want to go to medical school. And the very first thing that the admissions woman told me, she goes, why don't you just be a nurse? And I was like, is nursing and doctoring the same thing? I'm curious, because why are you asking me that? Because I came here and said I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't say I wanted to go into the medical field and do this other thing. So from the beginning, I was kind of told, you can't, why do that? Who wants to go to school for 8 years and it's going to be long and hard? And I said, well, what else am I going to be doing in 8 years? I just want to know. I could go on to be a nurse and then get my bachelor's in nursing or, become a nurse practitioner. But even if I climb that ladder, that's still 8 years of schooling. So why wouldn't I just go do the thing I want to do? And from the beginning, I was never afraid to reach for the highest possible rung I could see. Still to this day in my life, I don't really have ceilings. I'm like, yeah, let's go do it. And I have this audacity to think I can go do it. I'm like, if I don't, then I land somewhere in the middle or I try something else. What's that saying? Shoot for the stars and maybe you'll land among them or something, right? That was me. So I wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to be a doctor. I got my EMT license. I studied genetics in college. I have published research. It took me a very long time. I had more kids while I was in college to get there. It took me almost 10 years, I think, to get through school, to get my 2 undergraduate degrees because I had to ramp up and ramp back and ramp up and ramp back. But I did it.
Before you keep going, what was your published research on? I want to know. What were you geeking out about and so into that you were researching about? Tell me.
So, secret fact, I am the University of Michigan 2012 Distinguished Researcher of the Year. I used to do genetic and toxicology research. So I have one set of research that's been published in a toxicology textbook. I used to study bacteria that cause food poisoning. We were trying to find a mechanism of action to create an antidote, virtually, or essentially. And then a second set was genetic testing on butterflies that were dying out and testing this bacterial genetic deformation that no matter what the government was doing to repopulate these butterflies, they were going to die anyway. I'm a super nerd in my core.
That is so cool. I love all of this so much, Flossie. I love this. Okay, so you have more children. You make yourself through 2 undergraduate degrees, which is getting through 1 is difficult without children. So getting through 2 with children and managing a life like that is, I imagine, even more challenging to do. When you found yourself then ready and finished with university, what did you do next? Obviously, by this point, you're smart. There's nothing that can stop you from doing anything. And so at this point, knowing that you're smart, knowing your aptitude, what is it that you decide and how do you start to approach life next? What does it start to look like?
So honestly, after I graduated, my husband was in the military. So, he dragged us to Southern California. We were in San Diego. I had 4 kids under the age of 12, and I had just taken my MCATs. And I said, he's getting deployed again. And I said, there's no possible way I can do this right now. I said, I worked this hard. I got to here. I'm going to have to wait again. I was always last. And I felt very defeated. I felt like I worked my ass off and I kept having, other people's needs put ahead of mine, like my spouse's, the military's, my children's. And I felt very defeated. And I was unemployed and trying to figure out my life. And I accidentally started a business out of my home kitchen in military housing. And I did it out of pure necessity of an opportunity and needing money. And I was like, I can't work the hours that a job requires me to with these kids by myself. And I need money. So somebody had offered me to meal prep for them, which I was doing for my family every week anyway. And once I told other friends I was doing it, my inbox exploded. And within a few months, I was making $30,000 a month out of my home kitchen. And I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. But, how do you go from making, 20 or 30 meals a week for your family of six to, 3, 4, 5, 7, 800 out of, a home kitchen with one stove and one refrigerator. And again, like I don't have ceilings. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. It opened up this world to me of health and wellness still, which was in my core. I was a big healthy person, healthy food, preventative medicine. Like I always believed your lifestyle could really help with the way, your body reacts to diseases. So I was already very preventative health focused. And I was like, well, maybe this is a Band-Aid to get to medical school. Maybe I can help feed people healthy, nutritious, affordable food, and I can make a difference in people's lives by giving them something that's cheaper than McDonald's, but healthy and home cooked. And the first company was called Healthy Mama, which was my livelihood for a few years. But I found that I was really good at scaling and operations and people and leadership. And I could scale really, really fast. Meeting mentors and business advisors, everybody was like, wait, you did what with what? And everybody was dumbfounded. And I was like, yeah, I just did it. And years later, I understand my brain just operates a lot faster than most people.
I can attest to that. Your brain does operate a lot faster.
I can build a plan really quickly, but I also can execute it very quickly. But I also am not afraid of failure in any way. I mean, you fail every day, big and small, and I'm not afraid to fail. My life pivoted really, really quickly from this medical Dr. Flossie path to stay-at-home mom, defeated military spouse, to newfound business owner where I had to Google every single thing about business that I had ever learned. So it was a whole turning point that has just continued to climb until today, where I'm at.
It's amazing. It's a big deal to go from I don't have any money right now to I'm going to give this a shot to holy bananas. We're making $30,000 a month. And then obviously there are these inflection points in a business and they're business inflections, but they have like real material, personal outcomes. All of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe Flossie can buy the name brand groceries for the house. And, so when you started to see this exponential increase in your personal revenues, obviously we know certain points in the business, you have to reinvest. And so it's not always this linear sort of growth, but there are moments where all of a sudden things feel different and they can look different. And so how did you and what did you do with your resources when you first started to feel some of those inflection points?
So I think the most important part was the second that I could pay myself and dictate what I was doing and how much I was making, that light bulb was what changed my whole world. I didn't have to follow anybody else's rules. I've never been a rule follower. I always did it my own way, bossy Flossie. But the second that I learned I was barely hireable out of college for $20 an hour working in a lab to I can go work a few hours a day around my kid's schedule and make all this money. It was incredibly powerful. And it's a feeling that I knew I would never give up. And the autonomy that money then gives you to do those things, to say, I am only going to work so many hours today, or I am going to take a family vacation, things we had never done, get out of debt, all the things a young military enlisted family of six, you don't have a whole lot. Suddenly, we didn't have to struggle. We didn't have to go to USO food handouts for cases of diapers. We could pay the bills. We could eat as much as we wanted to. And growing up poor, it's a different kind of freedom that people who've never not had money, they don't know what that feels like, to not be able to buy groceries or to walk in with $50 and say, I have to use a calculator for everything I buy because this is literally the only dollars I have to feed my kids for the week. So money is freedom, but making your own money on your own terms and dictating the amount is power. And that changed my whole life.
Ah, that is so powerful. And so how did you then, these years that you were building Healthy Mama and growing this organization, really this was the beginning, and you said this so clearly, this was the beginning of unlocking this unlimited possibility and like unlimited potential. You want to get to know God, go become an entrepreneur. You want to know, like, really test yourself and all the things and like come up against all your stuff, like go run a business and you'll quickly sort of figure things out. But your career obviously didn't stop then. And so how did you, and I think sometimes really interesting for most business owners, and I see this a lot with women founders that I know, they start their first business and they think it's going to be their last. And it's like, and there is like heart, mind, money, everything sort of goes into this business as it needing to be the last business, the retirement business. It's all in there. And certainly for you, this was just the beginning. So can you share with me a little bit about this transition out of this first business and how you began to exercise this muscle of I'm a creator, I create companies, I create movements, and to keep doing that over and over again?
It's true. It's your identity, right? This is me. I am Healthy Mama. Healthy Mama is me. Who am I if I'm not Healthy Mama? And there was some time because my husband was being restationed, also as a military spouse, I don't always get to dictate my life. The military does that for you. And I built a brick and mortar facility with staff that required me on site in a city where my husband was not going to be living anymore. So sometimes your hand is forced based on lifestyle. But as much as I loved what that business did, we produced 500,000 healthy, affordable meals in San Diego. And I'm so proud of it. I hated it. I worked 20-hour days on my feet in a, mass production facility, literally cooking thousands of pounds of food. And no matter how many employees I had over 100 employees at one point, I was still never not in that kitchen. And I just was exhausted. But I had been shown, like, behind the curtain. I was like, oh, this is how you build businesses. This is how you make money. They're meant to be bought and sold and bought and sold and created and sold. And, the same, I guess, psychological disconnect that allowed my strength and stability as a child, where I can like partition emotions and operations. I was like, things I have to do versus things I feel. I brought that to business. And even to this day, my staff, my team, my family have all worked for me. My sister-in-laws, my daughter. I compartmentalize business is business and personal is personal. And it's just a business. Identities will come and go. Businesses will come and go. Jobs will come and go. And it's totally okay. And some serve a purpose for a while and some don't. Some succeed and some fail. And that's okay. I'll never stop building businesses. And I have some that are open to this day that I just pop in to make a little bit of money and pop back out. And I'll never scale them. I'll probably never sell them, but it's okay. I just knew that first company just gave me a taste of what I could go do. And I was insatiable. I was like, oh, what else can I learn? There's all these other industries out here. And I realized I was really good at the 80% of business. I learned the rules, ops and sales and money and revenue and legal. And I was like, I can apply that to any industry. I was excited to go build again and see also, was I really good like I thought I was? Like that validation piece. And then when I did it and then did it again and then did it again, I was like, okay, I'm really good at this.
I love that so much. I can relate in so many ways. It's like oh yeah, like I got this. Oh yeah, I got this. I got this.
Yeah.
Like it's like,
I'm good. And every time you like doubt creeps in a little bit and you're like, never mind. I'm really good at this.
That's so funny.
Pause for a second. If you're not already on the Wealth Catalyst Substack, you are missing out. Over 20,000 people have subscribed, and they are diving into stories, strategies, and money expanders you won't find anywhere else. Join us today and keep fueling your wealth journey. Check out the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
So obviously, your career has been dotted by such different kinds of roles and supporting different kinds of organizations. There's been this really wonderful through line of work with military spouses and sort of working on behalf of those who are in service. And I think it's such a beautiful through line, but yet the roles and the companies that you've supported and built have all been really different. As you were moving within these identities, right? Creating some, deleting some, creating others, can you sort of share any moments that became further inflection points for yourself? At this point, it's easy to say, once you've done this a couple times, oh, I understand frameworks and I can kind of drop in and apply the frameworks. And so in some cases, that's really fun and exciting, but then also some frameworks can get boring, right? You're like, all right, I know how this goes. And like, here's the process and here's the path and here's what my income can look like. And it's so funny. It's almost like when you can reverse engineer the whole thing and see what your take home actually looks like versus your effort, you can actually make a really interesting decision as a human to say, is it worth my time and my energy? What were some of these inflection points where you had some big aha moments and also where things maybe started to materially change for you guys? Where all of a sudden there was like another moment or another pop that happened. What did those look like?
Luckily, when my husband retired from the military, all of a sudden he had a retirement check, he had a disability check, he moved into a whole nother career. I was at the peak of my money-making career. And suddenly, not only did we do really well at making money before, we were doing really, really well at making money. And it can become a grind that you get stuck in where I am pretty visible and I am grateful for people who want to work with me. But I said yes a lot more than I should have. And I realized I can work myself 18, 20-hour days. I'm used to that. And I realized I just didn't want to anymore. And when my husband retired, I was like, what is the threshold, right? Like how much is good enough money? But I also don't touch my computer after 5 and on the weekends, right? Like now I'm traveling and now I'm napping and now I'm dating my husband again. So I think one of the biggest inflection points when you do grow up poor, you have that mindset of like, when is enough enough? Because you're always afraid the rug's going to be ripped out from underneath you and it's all going to fall. And lots of therapy and, great strategic investments to build yourself a little nest and understanding that life isn't all about work. It's also about enjoying what your work does and enjoying the money that you make. Somebody once said, you're never going to lay on your deathbed and say, I wish I had worked more. And every day I just log off because there's always more work to do, always. And I just am okay with what gets done in a day and I choose not to do more. And I think another big inflection point was really that businesses serve me in a different way. I can go make money with companies that I don't feel good about. And I didn't like that. It didn't have a mission component. It didn't have a feel-good component. I mean, there's companies whose sole jobs are just to go make money. And a couple of those contracts or opportunities, I was like, yeah, that's icky. I don't like that. And I quickly gravitated back to doing good and doing well. It's where my balance stays in the middle. So I have 3 buckets. This is what I say now in this current phase of my life. I have 1 bucket where I make like no money, but it's something that I love to do. It gets a little bit in it. I have my middle bucket where I do good stuff and I make some money, right? There's a balance. Then I have the 3rd bucket, which has a little bit in it. It's something I do just for the money. It's really good money. I just do it once or twice a year where I'm like, okay, thank you. But I try to stay in that middle bucket where I can balance, it's never going to pay me $1 zillion, but I'm grateful to do the work that I do every day. And I balance the 2 smaller buckets, things that don't pay me, but I love, and then things that do pay me that I hate.
Yeah. What a wonderful way of like organizing your life and also like your energy, like how to organize your energy based on like what these outcomes and also like what will serve your spirit and your heart and make you feel good. And your life today is certainly different from the life in which you grew up in. And I'm curious, from the standpoint of being a family of 6 and having had your family also grow up with you, right? And so there's so much that's like connected in terms of everyone's identity and new experiences. And I'm just so certain that your children think you're a superhero and are probably like, my mom goes out every day to save the world. But how have you guys sort of approached money conversations at home? Like, are the kids involved in these conversations? Is it something that is spoken about? What are the philosophies or conversations that have permeated through the household over these years?
Yeah. So my oldest is 26 and my youngest is 14. So, I say my oldest is my first pancake. You get it right by the fourth one, right? So by the time I got to the fourth kid, she's never known struggle, right? She's decked out in Lululemon and Uggs and in ski club and, is trying to book a trip to Paris for Christmas, right? But my oldest has experienced us living in like a 1-bedroom apartment when mom worked 3 jobs. It's a different type of what they've experienced from their own life, but we do talk about it. The rest of my family, still is not in the same position we are. We happen to retire back in the hometown where I grew up. So they're confronted with people that I knew when I was young Flossie who now work at their schools and are their nurses and are the receptionists. So they're like, are you Flossie's child? And so they know a lot. And I'm very transparent. We talk to them about how much money we make today. We talk to them about taxes and strategy and investing. We try to get them to understand the value of how spoiled they are. My daughter wanted something this weekend. She's like, it was only $80. And I was like, okay, go do the math and tell me how many hours you need to work at minimum wage to say it's only $80. And then if you do something around my house for that 6 hours, is it worth 6 hours of your time? And then she's like, no. So we try, they're still kids and teenagers, but they have their own investment accounts. They do chores every week. My youngest 2 are 14 and 16. They get $20 a week, 10 in their savings and 10 in their spend. Spend is for anything you want. Savings, you can only use it on big things or holidays. So we're teaching them the value of saving, of having money, autonomy, of being able to swipe their own debit cards, of seeing their own 529 and investment accounts that they can't touch grow as we put money in it every week. We teach them. And my daughter loves to log into her account and slide the what could be bar if we keep investing. And she goes, look what it could be when I'm 45. And she gets excited. And I think if you don't show your kids the possibilities of $20 a month or $100 a month, or how hard do you have to work to get that $80 hoodie? I always have to ground them because this wasn't always our lives, right? Where I could just be like, here's money for your lacrosse shoes at a lacrosse tournament this weekend. They don't see it, right? So they were very good. The boys are a little harder than the girls, but we talk about money. It's so hard because I'm so nervous that they will take it all for granted.
One of the things that I'm often reminded of is that, everyone born on this planet can't escape their own trauma. Theirs may not be the same as yours, but they're going to have their own. And high school is a real pain in the butt. And being a young person in this world right now, I imagine is really difficult.
Oh, yeah. It's rough. Having teenagers is rough. I'll take diapers over, toddlers over teenagers, anything.
Oh my God. It's so funny. In terms of, now today, your work is so powerful. The work that you're doing as the CEO of Stella Foundation and the women that you are serving. I mean, Flossie, you've spent your whole life in service. Education is such a core part of who you are, being an adjunct professor, teaching students, constantly being in the world and being a voice and an advocate for the things you believe in. Takes a lot of energy. I don't imagine you're pounding Red Bulls, but it takes a lot of energy and vision to be able to do that. And with your current work at Stella, what I think is so profound has been the way in which you've really catalyzed capital, but also women who are building incredible businesses and the organizations and the angels and the capital allocators who can really support them in doing that. And it feels to me like this great sort of, and you're so young, so I hate to say culmination, but like, this great sort of narrative body of the work that you've been doing across so many different sectors really coming together to move the needle in a substantial way. Tell me more about how you've been called to this particular work, and also what are the visions and dreams, because I have no doubt that what you're building not only has already happened, but now that you've hit these KPIs, it's like, okay, shit, what else is on the like Flossie milestone list?
Well, right now it's a lot of napping. That's on my milestone list. I'm going to take some downtime. But on the trajectory of what we do, I like to put those that we serve in 3 buckets. And it's all under the women's flag. I think that's important because women see the women's flag and they come in the door, but they're all in different phases and stages of life. And I think because of my background and my entrepreneurial journey onto my investing journey, I think that we do our communities a disservice by having these 0 to 1 founders just getting started or ideating, or all the way up to, I just need to make my first 100K. And we put these women in a bucket: freelancers, solopreneurs, brick and mortars, Etsy shop owners. And we say, okay, you go get served by SBDCs, women's business centers, SCORE. And then we have these 1 to 2 women that might have some business background or exposure, but they're building scalable, venture-backable businesses, right? They're trying to get to 7 figures and beyond. And those are served by the startup community, right? Startup Grinds, the Y Combinators, the Techstars. They don't talk to each other. And I think that we do our communities, especially our women who are so far behind, a disservice because they get into these rooms and they've never been taught the mechanics of capital. They've never been taught all the things I had to learn, right? But they're too nervous to stop when they're in mixed gendered rooms and say, I actually don't know that. I don't know how investing works. I just have an idea and I was put in this room and told to go get investment capital. And then the third bucket is investment. We need to ignite more women investing, which is your whole work, right? If we don't first give women the permission and the option to understand what investing is, from, my first 10 companies I got equity in, I worked for equity. I exchanged services. I didn't have capital to invest, but I said, I'm really smart and I can come on your board and I'll exchange the service package for 2%, 4%, 6%, 10% sometimes of these companies, because I knew if my hands were in their business, they were more likely to be successful. And then I went on up the ladder, equity crowdfunding, angel checks, but nobody taught me that. Nobody said, hey, here's all the ways you can build your wealth. And I think that if we don't get these 3 communities talking to each other, just because someone's an Etsy shop owner doesn't mean they can't be an investor. It doesn't mean that they can't go on to raise venture capital and scale. Just because you're building a venture-backable business doesn't mean you can't learn from that 0 to 1 who has to think revenue first every day. And I think that I just wave the women's flag and go, hey, come over here. If you're doing these things, let's show you under the hood through education, community, programming, and fun to say, no matter which of these buckets you fall in, you might fall in one, you might eventually fall in all 3, like me. But if we don't show them what's behind those curtains and stop and say, has anybody ever showed you this? Come over here, walk in this room, let me show you. And I can tell you, I got started at Stella Foundation because Dr. Sylvia Ma, our founder, was my very first mentor in Healthy Mama. And I was actually hired to cater a demo day for Stella. So I brought all the food over a decade ago and catered it, was so excited because I was part of the cool kids room and I saw all these investors and I was like, what is this? And I want to learn. And they went and they closed the doors to do the pitches. And I was like, what's in there? What are those women doing? And I use that as an example of somebody opening the door for me and saying, this is what they're doing in here. But to me at the time, I thought I was going to have this massive food company. And then somebody showed me another road. And I took it. And now I'm showing other people what's behind those doors. And I think that if we don't operate in a way that tears those walls down and our organizations don't communicate, we're doing everyone a disservice.
I love you, Flossie. You're just so great. Okay, so you started to allude to this investing journey that you went on. And obviously, like, there are all these different entry points, and to have had exposure 10 years ago to a pitch room even is even something where most women are like, at that time, there's pitch rooms that, like, there are places where people want to hear what I'm doing. And,
there's women with money? Where are they?
I mean, that's a really big deal 10 years ago. As you were thinking and starting to flex your muscle, I think investing is really a muscle to be flexed. You start in some categories, you try new things, you get comfortable with risk, you try other things. Where did you get your information from? How did you start to educate yourself on the different ways that you could invest? And how did you sort of build that confidence to take incremental risk? Where did that come from?
So I think the confidence is like I told you I don't have any fear. So I was like, sure, I'll figure that out. I'm a fail first, fail forward kind of person. But once I learned about this whole investment world, I knew that there was all these different things I needed to do. There's the personal work, that is financial foundations personally, setting my children up, doing all the things I needed to do for my own family and my legacy before I could go gamble any of that. Even though I'm fearless, I knew I had to fix my house first, right? Learn about tax strategy and keeping as much of my money as I could possibly keep, right? Like getting good, smart people around me. And I learned through reading. I'm a nerd. So I would spend my nights reading blogs and watching YouTubes and following podcasts of women in the investment world who were talking tips and tricks. And I would read Y Combinator has this startup library that is massive with blogs and blogs and blogs on what's the difference between pre-seed and seed and Series A. And what are the check sizes and due diligence? And, I started to learn all these things, LPs and GPs. And what I knew is I was going to start to gamble on some of these founders that I was supporting with education and resources and curriculum. And I said, the first thing I can do is gamble my time because that's low cost. So that was where I'll exchange services. I'll be on your board for equity. And then I slowly worked my way up to writing checks, $500, $5,000. And it's still scary because more than likely those founders are not going to make it or make an exit. And you're really gambling on something big one day. So my goal is to keep gambling a little bit at a time, but to always make sure that I don't take from my house. That is my safe space, and that's where I'll put my money. In a smart strategic investment strategy with my financial planner. And I'll continue to pull little chunks out on my lotto tickets, right? Is what I think of startup investing. And, I will get there one day. It's hard for me because I work with these startups every single day. And I think so many of them are brilliant that for me, the analytical and emotional part starts to blur a little bit because they're like my babies and I've supported them and I believe in them and I want them to succeed. And that's totally different than writing a $50,000 or $100,000 check and saying, I really think you're the people that are going to take this to an exit. And I work pre-seed, which is scary stage. So most of the founders I'm working with, are in pre-seed and seed stages. So I think on my personal journey, I just continue to read and learn and listen from women who've done it. And you've built these incredible rooms at the Wealth Catalyst event in San Francisco. I was just soaking it all up. And I was like, oh, there's more. And then in New York City, it was you can also invest in Broadway and you can invest in art. And I was like, ooh, your pathway is unlocked. What is that? What does that mean? So I think you just have to continue to surround yourself with women who are doing it. And ask them how they did it and ask them for advice and, resources and support You can't be afraid to talk about it. Like, I only have this much money. What do I do with it? You have to get really, really good at being open, like you are, like open about money. Like, how do I do this? But I'm just going to keep writing bigger checks. And then hopefully one day it'll pay off in a very big way that I can be a foundation or something. That's my dream. I would love to be the check writer. Like, here you go. You get a check, you get a check, you get a check, you get a check. Well, one day I'll get there.
I love that so much. I know we're running out on time. There are two questions that I'd love to ask you, Flossie. The first is, obviously money is, it can be very serious. We've talked about what it's like to not have any, what it's like to be scrappy, what it's like to start to invest it. And all of those things are pretty serious. But money is also, I think, super fun, enables us to do great things. There's so many fabulous things you can do with your money. What has been one of your most recent fabulous things that you have done with your money?
We just booked a trip to Paris. We're tired and we're taking some downtime for the holidays. And, we were talking to the kids about going on a vacation, and we chose Paris. And I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to plan for a year or budget. I just went online and booked the trip. And that is a type of like fun and freedom that comes with money that you can't explain, right? And I'm so excited to go eat and drink my way through Paris for a week at Christmas time.
I love it so much. And then my final question is, all the women, and there are some men, but mostly women who listen to this podcast, we love to rally around the women who are on the show. So what is it that you are calling in right now, Flossie? How can we support you?
So currently, Stella Foundation is down nearly 30% in funding and donations this year due to the hard political and economic climate that we're in. And we did actually almost 8 times the output on our programming side. So in true women's fashion, we did way more with way less, but we're calling on people to step up and support. We have some big donation campaigns coming up in November and December, end of year. Make it part of your tax strategy. Use your DAF, pay it forward. But this foundation can only survive, and we can only do the work that we do with direct support from those that want to see these women thrive. So my call to action is to donate. Donate to Stella, donate to the program, or if you're looking for great investment options, write a check. These women all need capital just as bad as we do. Write a check. Come to, an event or one of our Angels programs or our investment events and write a check. So always, it all has to do with money. Give, invest, donate.
I love it. Flossie Hall, you are a beacon of light in a turbulent world. You light the torch for all of us to be inspired for a life of service and vision and unlimited possibilities. I am so grateful to have had you here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Getting Rich Together. My hope is that you leave every episode feeling more inspired, more powerful, and more connected. Until next time, remember, you have everything it takes to create wealth on your terms.